A quiet evening can turn into a turning point you never saw coming. Mine began with a knock, a steady look, and a truth I didn't want to hear. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. I had just turned off the faucet when I heard the knock. 3 polite taps that didn't hurry me, didn't demand anything, just waited. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon soap and black tea. On the table, a cooling casserole sat under a dish towel, the kind of weeknight dinner I make without thinking. Outside the window, the last of the evening light folded itself behind the maple trees, and the house settled into that hush I love. The refrigerator's soft hum, the clock's even heartbeat, the gentle creak of old wood remembering footsteps. When I opened the door, there he was, Even, my son's friend. He's been around for years, first as the quiet boy who forgot his backpack, then as the tall young man who remembered to bring it for someone else. He had that open kind of face people trust quicker than they mean to. Tonight, though, there was something else. A steadiness in his eyes, like he'd rehearsed for this moment and decided he wouldn't run from it. "I, Mrs. Carter," he said, voice careful but clear. "Do you have a minute?" Of course I did. I'd always seemed to have a minute for other people, whether I know it or not. I stepped aside and let him in. He wiped his shoes on the mat, a small courtesy that should not have mattered and yet did. We sat at the kitchen table. He refused tea with a polite shake of the head, folded his hands, and looked at me, really looked at me. And I felt a small brace inside my chest, the way you do before a wave reaches your ankles. "It's about Noah," he started, and my fingers found the spoon by the sugar bowl, turning it once, then again. "Noah is my son. Stubborn, decent, sometimes thoughtless in the way young men can be when the world still feels like a hallway they own." Even took a breath. "He thinks you don't believe in him." The spoon stopped. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The words were simple, but they landed with the unflinching accuracy of a stone finding the center of a pond. Ripples moved through me. Memories, small scenes I had filed away as nothing. The way I corrected Noah's calendar, the sigh I let slip when he changed majors again, the text I sent with an article about debt and responsibility. I had meant it as care. Did it wear the wrong face when it reached him? "He told you that?" I asked, softer than I meant to. "Not exactly," Even said. "He wouldn't say it like that. But I see it. When you talk about his plans, he laughs in this way that's not laughing. He looks down. He starts agreeing with you before you even finish. I think he loves you so much he'd rather disappoint himself than you." I looked at the lemon streaks on the counter, the fork drying by the sink, the little nick on the table where a summer project went wrong years ago. My home, steady and familiar, felt suddenly like a witness. Even kept his eyes on me, not hard, not accusing, just unwilling to step aside from the truth he brought. It pressed gently but firmly, like a hand guiding a door closed against a draft. "I only want him to be safe," I said. I heard the thinness in my voice, the way it sounded like a coat excuse for staying indoors when the sky is clear. "I know," he replied. "You've done everything to keep him safe. But sometimes safety can sound like a vote of no confidence. And if that's the loudest thing he hears, he'll start believing it." The clock ticked on, impossibly steady. I thought of how I'd praised Noah as a little boy for tying his shoes, for reading the second paragraph, for riding the wobbly bike. Somewhere along the way, my praise had become a rubric, my protection a ledger. Somewhere along the way, I had confused steering with love. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. It wasn't defensive. It was the question a person asks when something heavy has been set down between you, and they want to know if you'll both carry it. "Because Noah's my friend," he said, "and because he won't tell you, and because you look at people the way you're looking at me now, like you actually hear them. I thought maybe you'd hear this before he starts thinking smaller to fit into the space he thinks you'll accept." There it was. Not a scolding, not an ambush. A hand extended across a table that smelled like tea and lemon and the faintest heat of baked noodles. I felt the sting behind my eyes, the honest ache of realizing good intentions can wear heavy boots. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. The words were a little rough, like a key that hasn't been used in a while sliding into an old lock. Something inside me turned. I saw suddenly the conversation I needed to have with my son, not to fix his life, but to open a window and let him breathe. Even exhaled, a quiet relief, and for a moment we both listened to the house again. The hum, the clock, the safe, ordinary world that goes on even when your heart learns a new shape. He glanced at the casserole and smiled a little. "That smells good," he said. "It'll reheat," I replied. "And so can we." The next morning felt heavier than most, as if the words Evan had spoken had settled into the walls overnight. I went about my usual routine, boiling water for coffee, folding the dish towel, straightening the cushions on the sofa. But each task carried a weight, a question. Did my son truly believe I doubted him? The thought clung to me like the damp chill of early dawn. When Noah came down the stairs, his hair still mussed from sleep, I watched him more carefully than usual. He was humming something under his breath, a tune I couldn't place, but his shoulders seemed tense, as if he carried an invisible load. He smiled when he saw me, but it was quick, almost rehearsed. I had seen that same look 1,000 times and mistaken it for ease. Now, after what Avon had told me, I wondered if it was armor. I placed his plate in front of him, scrambled eggs and toast just the way he liked when he was younger. He thanked me, sat, and dug in, but his eyes kept drifting toward the window, as if the world outside held safer ground than the kitchen table. I wanted to ask him outright, "Did I fail you? Did I make you feel small?" But the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I said softly, "You've been busy lately. How are things?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Fine, just a lot going on." That was his way of closing doors. I had learned over the years to respect it, but this time I saw the hesitation behind his movements, the pause before he answered. A mother's instinct told me there was more. I thought about Evan's courage, the way he had spoken for a friend. If a young man could carry honesty to my doorstep, then surely I, his own mother, would find a way to meet my son halfway. Later that day, I found myself replaying conversations in my mind. The time I told Noah maybe law school wasn't practical. The time I laughed, not unkindly, when he said he wanted to try writing. The sigh I gave when he switched jobs again. I thought I was protecting him from heartbreak, but maybe I had only taught him to expect doubt. That evening, the house glowed with the soft amber of lamps against the autumn dark. Noel sat on the couch, scrolling his phone, and I sat beside him. For a while, we shared the silence, the familiar comfort of our small living room. I watched the light trace the edge of his profile, and knew this was the moment. "Noah," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, "can I tell you something?" He looked up, wary but attentive. "I realized I may have made you feel like I don't believe in you. If I have, I'm sorry. That's not what I ever wanted. I only wanted you to be safe, but maybe I forgot to show that I also trust you." His expression shifted, just slightly. A blink, a breath, a softening. He leaned back, from forgotten, and let out a laugh that wasn't really laughter at all. You noticed that?" he asked quietly. And there it was, the confirmation I had dreaded and yet needed. My chest ached, but it also opened. For the first time in years, we were standing at the edge of honesty together. "I did," I answered. "And I want to do better." He nodded, his eyes shining, and for a long while we just sat there, mother and son, two people learning that love is not only protection but also faith. It was a fragile beginning, but beginnings often are. And as the night deepened around us, I thought of Evan's words and felt a gratitude I hadn't known before, for the honesty that cuts deep and for the chance it gives us to heal. The following days unfolded like quiet revelations. Each moment with Noah seemed to carry a new weight, a subtle reminder that love had to be more than correction, more than worry. It had to be belief. I found myself listening more closely, resisting the urge to fill silences with advice or warnings. Instead, I let him speak when he wanted to, even if the words came out uneven or uncertain. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Noel came into the kitchen while I was stirring a pot of soup. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, and for the first time in a long while, he looked at me not as though bracing for judgment, but as though testing the strength of a bridge. "I've been thinking," he began. His voice carried both hesitation and resolve. "About what you said the other night. About believing in me." I set down the spoon and turned to him, trying to keep my face open, my heart steady. "Yes." He drew a breath. "There's something I've wanted to do for years. But every time I thought about it, I'd hear your voice in my head, telling me to be careful, to think practical. And I'd stop myself before I even tried." The words cut, not with malice, but with truth. I felt the ache of recognition. How many dreams had I trimmed at the edges before they had the chance to grow? "What is it you've wanted to do?" I asked gently. He hesitated, then said, "Music. Not just playing guitar in the evenings or writing songs in my notebook. Really pursuing it. Giving it everything. I know it sounds risky, maybe foolish, but it's the only thing that makes me feel alive." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The steam from the pot rose in soft curls, the rain's rhythm grew louder, and I felt my heart race with the weight of his confession. I thought of the years I spent choosing safety over passion, of the jobs that paid the bills but drained my spirit, of the chances I'd never taken because the world told me they weren't sensible. I had wanted more for him, but in protecting him, had I only handed him my own fears. I reached out, touching his arm lightly. "Noah, if music is what stirs your soul, then you owe it to yourself to try. Not because it's easy, not because it's certain, but because it's yours. And I want you to know I believe in you, even when the path looks unclear." His eyes widened, and for the first time in years, I saw a spark of the boy who once believed he could do anything. He gave a small, disbelieving laugh, then shook his head. "I never thought I'd hear you say that. I never thought I'd need someone to remind me to say it," I admitted, thinking of Evan, of his steady gaze when he delivered the truth I needed to hear. We talked long into the night, about his music, about the fears that held him back, about the moments when he had nearly shared this with me but stopped short. I listened, really listened, and with every word, the distance between us shrank. Later, after he had gone upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the raindrops racing down the glass. My heart was heavy with regret, but also light with hope. Sometimes honesty cuts deep, yes, but the wound it leaves can be the place where love grows stronger roots. I thought of Evan again, of his courage to speak when silence would have been easier. His honesty had unsettled me, but it had also unlocked a door I hadn't realized I'd closed. And now, because of it, Noah, and I were finally walking into a new kind of truth together. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels less like emptiness and more like peace. For the first time in a long while, I felt I could breathe without the weight of unsaid words pressing on my chest. And I knew this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed carried a different rhythm, as if the house itself had shifted its tune. Where before there had been the weight of unspoken doubts, now there was conversation. Hesitant at first, then steady, like a stream finding its course after being blocked for too long. Noel practiced guitar in the evenings, his melodies drifting up the stairs and into my room. I used to think of music as a hobby that cluttered his time. Now I listened as if every note was a message, a reminder of his heart. One Saturday morning, I heard him playing on the porch. The sun was just rising, scattering golden light across the dew-soaked grass. I stood by the doorway unseen, watching him lean into the music, his face lit with the kind of focus and freedom I hadn't seen in years. It struck me then. This was what belief looked like when given space. It wasn't reckless. It was alive. Later that afternoon, Evan came by again. He carried his easy smile, though I sensed a hint of uncertainty in his eyes, perhaps wondering if I had truly taken his words to heart. I invited him in, set out tea, and thanked him, not just with words, but with the openness in my tone. "You helped me see something I should have noticed long ago," I told him. "It wasn't easy to hear, but I'm grateful you trusted me enough to say it." He shifted in his chair, a little embarrassed, but nodded. I just didn't want Noah to lose that part of himself. He's got so much to give. He does, I agreed, feeling the truth of it settle warmly inside me. And now I know my job isn't to narrow his path, but to walk beside him as he finds his own. That evening, Noah joined us at the table. He shared one of the songs he'd written, just a few verses, raw but beautiful. His voice wavered at first, but when he glanced at me and found no trace of judgment, only encouragement, he steadied. The room filled with a quiet strength, the kind that comes not from certainty, but from courage. When he finished, I clapped softly, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. "That was beautiful, Noah," I said, and I meant it, not as a mother offering comfort, but as someone who had been moved. His smile was small but real, and it carried more weight than any words could. In that moment, I knew something between us had healed. Not completely, perhaps, it would take time, but enough for both of us to stand taller. Later, when the house had grown quiet again, I sat alone by the window, watching the last streaks of light fade into night. The air was cool, the sky stretching wide, and I thought about how honesty, even when it cuts deep, can open a path toward growth. Evan's courage, Noah's trust, my willingness to listen. All of it had reshaped the way we stood together as a family. Life hadn't become easier overnight. The future still carried its risks, its unknowns. But what mattered now was not the guarantee of safety, but the assurance of belief. Noah knew I believed in him. I knew he carried a fire that deserved to burn. And I carried with me the lesson that love is not measured in how tightly you hold on, but in how freely you let someone step into their own light. As the stars appeared one by one, I whispered a quiet thank you to the boy who spoke truth with steady eyes, to the son who dared to share his dreams, and to the life that, even in its hardest moments, offers us the gift of second chances.